Imagine a 16-year-old girl who could neither read nor write, deciding she would change the fate of an entire nation, and then doing it. Imagine that the price of her certainty was fire, a stake, a rope, and a crowd that would not forget. This is not legend's thunderclap. It is a small voice that grew so bright it frightened kings, soothed soldiers, and at the end set the sky above Rouen shimmering with heat. Tonight, that voice begins as a whisper beside your pillow. Perhaps someone who carried your surname once stood in a market square while her rumor moved like wind through wheat. Perhaps a distant ancestor lifted a candle at dusk and breathed the same cool air, felt the same tremor of bells, the same hush before prayer. You and they are joined by breath, by heartbeat, by the old human wish to be led past fear toward meaning. As you lie down, your shoulders soften, the day unlatches. Let this story arrive the way night does, quietly, inevitably, until it is all around you. I promise you more than a tale polished by centuries. We will part the veil of legend to find the most controversial figure of the Middle Ages as she truly moves. A peasant child with dirt on her hands, a commander with ash on her cheek, a saint whose calm terrified her judges, a sacrifice the world could not stop watching. We will listen to the tension between faith and doubt, obedience and defiance, triumph and ruin, and we will let these opposites loosen, like tight knots easing in warm water. Close your eyes now. Feel the mattress hold you. Notice the slow river of your breath. With each exhale, the room grows softer, the edges of the present blur. Drift with me to a France of candlelight and cobblestone, to fields cut by winter wind, to a chapel where a girl stands very still, hearing something no one else can. The year is young, the bells are calling, and the path opens like a narrow door. We are stepping through. Night settles over Domrémy, like a woolen cloak pulled gently to the chin. The last red thread of sunset loosens, and a deeper blue hums across the fields. The air is damp and clean. It smells of fresh-cut straw, of turned earth, of smoke rising from a low hearth that refuses to sleep. Somewhere, a door thuds. Somewhere, a dog gives one lazy bark and curls back into itself. The village exhales. Inside a timbered cottage, the fire speaks in soft crackles. Sap pops, embers sigh, and a ribbon of smoke threads upward into the dark mouth of the chimney. The smoke has a taste, faintly sweet, faintly bitter, clinging to wooden bowls, to the rough wool of a shepherd's cloak hanging by the door, to hair braided for the night. On the floor, straw, still cool with evening, a little damp at the edges, smelling of meadow and rain. When you press your palm to it, it pricks the skin and then grows warm beneath your hand. Listen. Beyond the door, the wind brushes the trees, and they answer with a soft, leafy hush. The muse whispers somewhere beyond the hedges, hidden and patient, sliding past stones smoothed by centuries. Footsteps cross a plank floor, measured, careful, the sound of wood accepting weight and releasing it. A spoon taps the rim of a pot. A lid settles. The quiet comes back in. Light moves like water in this room. A candle beeswax thick melts slowly, its flame a steady bead. It paints the clay jug with honey and leaves the far corner in a pool of gentle shadow. The hearth casts an amber breath that warms your face and leaves your back cool. In that tender contrast, the body begins to loosen, shoulders softening, jaw easing, the day unclasping one hook at a time. The coarse linen at your wrist is honest against the skin, scratchy at first, then familiar, like the memory of a lullaby. Imagine stepping outside. The sky is a deep, velvet bowl pricked with winter-bright stars. The thatched roofs hold the chill, and the lanes smell of damp wood and horses. The church sits a little apart, squat and patient, a square of darkness against the darker hill. From its tower, bells drift on the air, not urgent, not loud, just enough to ripple the surface of the night. Each note presses lightly on the chest, and then lifts, like a small wave. The fields beyond the houses stretch in soft humps and furrows, stubbled from harvest. A fox passes, low and certain. A cow breathes a cloud into the frosted air. A hen rustles once and settles deeper. Your breath finds the rhythm of the village. Slow in, slow out. In the distance, a cartwheel ticks as it cools. A latch clicks. A window shutter answers the wind with a tender knock and then rests. Back inside, the warmth greets you as if it knew your name. The room is simple and generous. A table rubbed smooth by hands. A clay cup cool to the touch. A rosary laid where the light can find it. The walls exhale wood and smoke. The floor creaks in a friendly way, announcing each step and then forgetting it. You sit. The bench meets you with a quiet, sturdy acceptance. The shepherd's cloak, when lifted, is heavy and smells of lanolin and long grass under sun. Wrapped around your shoulders, it becomes a personal weather, a small summer held against the skin, while the world beyond continues its winter breathing. The sounds narrow further, the fire's tiny conversations, the distant bells soft as moth wings, the wind thinning to a whisper at the eaves. You can hear your own pulse in your ear, calm, reliable, as if the village, the river, and you share a single, slow heartbeat. Even silence here has textures, the hush of ash shifting, the feathered scrape of straw against straw, the delicate tick of cooling iron. Now the bed, a wooden frame, sturdy, plain. The mattress is straw, uneven but kind. When you lie down, the first feeling is of the earth itself, its coolness traveling up through wood and plant and into the bones. Then warmth returns, from the cloak, from your own body, from the embers. Your fingers discover the weave of the linen sheet, loose, slightly rough, honest, and find it soothing, the way beach sand warms when you stay still. The pillow smells of clean cloth and faint smoke, a scent that belongs to the rhythm of this house, this village, this century. Temporal bridge. Imagine you are not falling asleep in your own bed, but under the wooden roof of a 15th century home. Do you hear it? Far away, the bells are calling to mass. Their notes are spaced widely, as if they too are breathing. One tone, and then a pause long enough to let the mind glide forward. Another tone, and another pause, a little longer, a little softer. Between the bells, the night places its cool hand on your forehead. Time loosens. Breathe in the straw's meadow-sweet trace. Breathe out the chimney's gentle smoke. With each breath, the edges of things blur. The line between wall and shadow, between present and past, between hearing and remembering. The cottage gathers itself around you. Above, the beams creak once, a contented animal curling into sleep. Outside, the lane empties of sound. Even the wind forgets to speak. What remains is the steady pulse of the fire and the slow drift of your own breath. Let the air grow thicker with rest. Let your thoughts become simple objects in a simple room. A clay cup, a wooden bench, a folded cloak. If a worry knocks, let it knock and pass. The shutter knows how to do this. If a question rises, set it near the candle and watch the flame soften its edges. Your eyes grow heavy. The straw shifts to cradle the shape you offer it. The bells fade to memory, and the memory becomes part of the room's quiet. Domrémy sleeps. The river keeps its counsel. Somewhere, in a nearby chapel, a girl stands very still, listening. But for now, you are only breath and warmth and the calming weight of wool. With each exhale, the night settles deeper, and the path toward dream opens like a door, gently, gently swinging wide. She is a village daughter before she is anyone's banner. Dawn finds her the way it finds every house in Domrémy. Through the seam where shutter meets wall, a thin blade of pale light that widens until it becomes a room. Jean stands in that narrow river of morning with bare feet on a plank floor. The wood holds the night's cool. The air smells of ash and damp wool. She ties her hair back with a strip of linen. She lifts the bucket. The day begins. Fields do not care who you will one day become. They ask the same things of everyone. Hands, back, patience. Jean's hands are sure from practice. Lifting, bundling, tying, mending. She works beside her mother, beside her brothers. The rhythm of labor so familiar that it feels like breath. Bend, gather, rise, step, turn, lay down the sheath. When the sun climbs, sweat collects at her temples, and the rough cloth of her sleeve salt kisses her skin. When the wind moves over the wheat, it carries small gifts, the sweetness of crushed stalks, the cool of the river, the far-off yeast-warm scent drifting from a neighbor's oven. There is prayer threaded through it all, a quiet thread stitched into ordinary hours. Not the grand speech of priests, not the Latin that slides like a bell's tongue through a stone nave, but simple words under the breath, said to the Mother of God while kneading dough, said to the archangel while coaxing a stubborn calf through a gate. Her mother taught this kind of prayer, steady, clean, unadorned. Jean's lips move almost without sound. Thank you. Help me. I am yours. At vespers, she kneels on the cool stone, knees finding the polished dents worn by years of knees. Voices rise around her. The village a small choir, thin and heartfelt. The candles smell faintly of honey. A beam of light, dusty with motes, slants across the nave and lands on the hem of a statue's robe. Jean watches it drift like a slow gold cloud. Something inside her arranges itself around that brightness, like swallows circling a steeple. She does not know herself as remarkable. She knows mud that clings to shoes. She knows the little ache behind the eyes when the smoke will not clear from the hearth. She knows the thrift of a household where every scrap of fabric remembers a previous life, a shirt turned apron, a sleeve turned binding for a sheaf. She knows how to sit very still, listening to someone else's grief, how to carry water without spilling, how to mend a fence in wind that chills the knuckles. She laughs like other girls. She trips and blushes. She can be stung to anger by an insult and then later be stung by the shame of it. She is a person, not a portrait, and her world is made of particulars. Then, in the soft-bellied season of her 13th year, the air changes. She is in the garden when it happens. Late noon, light bright, but gentle. The kind that wraps around the edges of things and warms them from the outside in. Bees are at work. The pear tree leans as if listening. Jean lifts her head, not because of a sound exactly, but because of the way everything seems to be listening with her. The light concentrates, gathers itself, and there is a presence within it. It is not an argument or a thunderclap. It is attention, pure and focused. She is being regarded the way a flame regards a moth, with an intensity that is not cruel and not safe. Later she will call it a voice, because the human mouth is clumsy with mystery, but in the moment it is more than that, and less. It is understanding, conveyed without the friction of words. It carries a steadiness that steadies her. It carries an authority that does not bully, but has no wish to be resisted. There is kinship in it too, the shock of being suddenly known. "Be good, Jean," the voice says, when she learns to hear it as speech. "Go often to church." And then, braided into those simple commands, something larger. A sorrow for France heavy as rain clouds, a task that will someday be asked. She trembles. She weeps. Her heart beats so hard she can feel it in her throat. The garden goes on being a garden. Bees, pears, the sun cupping the leaves. But now the world has a secret center, and it is not where she thought. Fear arrives with the wonder, as night arrives with evening. She is not afraid that the voice lies. She is afraid of the truth being so alive it remakes her. She says nothing at first. Silence becomes a small room she knows her way around. Sometimes she looks at her mother in the thin light of late day, and her throat tightens. How could anyone bear to say aloud what she has heard? She presses her ear against the inside of the world and listens. Days build themselves, as they always did. The river keeps its course. Men grumble about taxes and war. Carts roll. Wheat ripens. And the voices return. Michael first, mighty and gentle. Words like clear water over smooth stones. Then Catherine and Margaret, companionable as older sisters who know the road and walk beside you. Names like lamps in the mind. Jean learns to distinguish them the way a shepherd knows his sheep by footstep alone. With them comes a training in patience. Not yet, they say, like mothers holding back a child's hand from bread too hot to touch. Not yet. She argues inside herself. Not with the voices, which she loves as one loves the light that makes sight possible, but with the shape of what they suggest. She can feel the weight of mail without touching it. She can smell smoke that is not hearth smoke. She sees, in brief, painted like flashes, a banner. White, with the names of Jesus and Mary, and the way it moves in wind like a creature alive. She hears hooves and iron, hears men's laughter and men's prayer and men's doubt. She is a girl who has never ridden far, who knows no letters, who carries bread to neighbors in a basket and returns the basket clean. The task they hint at belongs to a world beyond the hedgerow. Fear puts a hand on her shoulder and squeezes. But faith is also a hand, and it steadies from the other side. It is not a firework. It is a slow lamp that does not go out when the wind changes. In the quiet between chores, she tries on the words she will one day say, the way a seamstress lays cloth against a body to see how it falls. She does not yet know the Dauphin's face, only that he is called Charles, and that he is uncrowned and uncertain. She does not yet know the road to him, only that there will be one, and that her feet know how to take step after step once they begin. At night, when the house settles into its creaks and sighs, she lies awake with fatigue like a friendly animal at the foot of the bed. Fatigue knows her well. It knows the long drag of a pail, the way light labor accumulates until it becomes a soft kind of ache that hums behind the joints. She speaks to God inside that ache, where the self is honest. I am small. I am afraid. But if this is from you, then carry me like a river carries a leaf. Let me float in the direction of your will and not struggle so much. Some mornings she wakes with a clarity that feels like frost, sharp, clean, bracing. On those mornings, she is decisive to the point of startling herself. She looks at her father's hands, cracked and strong, and sees the years in them. She looks at her mother's face and sees how love makes a person luminous without their knowing it. She wants to protect all of it. The oven's warmth, the sound of geese at dawn, the common prayer of the village when someone is ill. This desire grows until it meets, like a river meeting the sea, the larger sorrow of a kingdom at war. And in that brackish water, beneath the mixing of currents, a vow forms. She goes first to people near enough to test the shape of her calling. A cousin hears her and laughs kindly, as one might laugh at a child claiming that the moon has sent instructions. A priest listens longer, asks questions, scrutinizes her face as if truth has telltale shadows that pass over the eyes. He warns her about deception, the kind that slinks in, wearing light like a stolen cloak. She accepts the warning, carries it along with the certainty, like a stone in a pocket that keeps a person mindful of their balance. Time thickens. The voices insist with a tenderness that does not soften their resolve. Go to Vaucouleurs, they say. Seek Robert de Baudricourt. Tell him what must be done. Jean's stomach tightens when she thinks of the captain, his practical eyes, his impatience with village superstitions and girlish fervors. But the instruction repeats, and she has learned to trust repetitions. They are the bells of her life, marking the hours she must keep. Fear's portrait inside her is detailed and convincing. It shows her father's anger when he hears. It shows neighbors' whispers braided with pity and scorn. It shows the long, muddy road, and the ways a lone girl can be made to suffer upon it. It shows the possibility, never spoken by the voices, but present like a shadow in bright noon, that obedience could lead not to triumph, but to shame and death. Fear speaks with the voice of safety and calls itself prudence. Faith's portrait is quieter. It does not paint banners or crowns. It shows only a path with room for one pair of feet, and a hand extended into the next hour, waiting for hers. It asks no guarantees. It gives none. It is, at heart, a relationship. A yes repeated calmly until the yes has weight, until it is a habit the soul wears comfortably, even under armor. Between fear and faith stands resolve, and resolve is what happens when the two have argued themselves to a standstill, and the body, which cannot live in debate forever, begins to move. Jean finds herself gathering what she will need for travel. Small things, practical, each with a prayer tucked beneath it, like a slip of paper. Bread, a cloak, the memory of her mother's hands and blessing. She practices how to speak to men of power without shrinking, how to describe the instruction without dressing it in vanity or trimming it with apology. She revises sentences as if they are seams that must not split under pressure. On the last night before she tells her parents, fatigue sits heavy again, but it is gentler now, like a big animal curled close. She watches the fire to its last red eye. She tries to memorize the sound of this house asleep. She will need that sound later, in the places that are not kind. She promises the room she will return, though she knows enough of journeys to suspect that returns are never to the same door. The heart that comes home is a different shape than the heart that left. She speaks to her father first. The words come out steady, as if she is standing on a plank over water and has decided not to look down. His face goes through weathers: storm, cold wind, the thin sun after rain. Anger keeps company with love in tight quarters. Both are loud. He forbids. He warns. He tells her that girls cannot walk roads swollen with soldiers and thieves. He reminds her that his duty is to keep her whole. and that the world does not welcome women who step outside the fence that has always contained them. She nods. She does not argue with his love. She is grateful for it even as it hurts. Later, alone, she cries. A quiet cry that does not demand an audience. The voices do not comfort the way people might. They do not say, there, child." They stand with her in the room until her breathing slows. They hold open the door between now and the next step. They are faithful in the way of stars. Steady, distant, exact. She goes to Vaucouleurs anyway. The road begins before dawn, when the world is blurred at the edges and everything feels like a beginning. Her fear travels with her like a second shadow, shorter when the sun is high, long and reaching when it is low. Fatigue becomes both companion and tutor. It teaches her how to break a long distance into small distances, how to rest in the pause between heartbeats. She prays not for success, but for continued willingness. Before the town gate, she hesitates. It is not the iron she fears, but the eyes that will measure her as she passes through. She has learned to accept being measured. She has learned to let others keep their scales while she keeps her task. The guard asks her business with a voice made of boredom and habit, and she answers plainly. She must see the captain, she says, because God has sent her to lift a siege and bring a prince to his crown. The guard laughs, but not unkindly. He sends her away with a shake of the head and a story to tell at supper. She returns the next day, and the next. Resolve is stubborn, but it has manners. It knocks until the door opens or the knuckles bleed. Word reaches Robert de Baudricourt. He receives her at last because the persistence itself is a kind of credential. He is not charmed. He is not even curious at first. He looks at this girl with wind-tangled hair, at her hands scrubbed, but still marked by soil, and he hears a claim too large to fit inside her small body. He dismisses her with the confidence of a man who knows how the world works. She returns again. This time, she speaks not as a beggar, but as a messenger repeating a message. She does not embellish. She does not dramatize. She says what she has been given to say. She says it with the calm that sometimes comes when the heart has cried all its tears in private. Something in her steadiness moves him a fraction, the way a river, over time, persuades rock. He does not agree, but he does not forget. In the days that follow, small rumors begin to lace themselves through the town. About a peasant girl with light in her face, about a certainty that makes men uncomfortable and, unexpectedly, less tired. When doubts bite at her, those fast, small teeth, she answers them not with grand gestures, but with work. She helps in kitchens where she can. She tends a child with a cough. She carries water. She goes to Mass. She tucks her fear into the familiar motion of service and finds that it rides more quietly there. Faith is not a wind at her back. It is a weight in her hands that keeps them from shaking. The voices do not hurry her. They do not scold. They repeat their instruction in different weathers. On sunlit mornings when confidence is easy, and on rain-streaked afternoons when every plan looks shabby. She learns to obey by inches. She learns that obedience is an art made of thousands of small brushstrokes. The picture they make will be seen only later. Word comes, at last, that she will be given a small escort to take her to Chinon. It is not a promise of victory. It is permission to take the next step. When she hears, she does not leap or shout. She sits very still and lets the news settle. Then she stands and begins the simple inventory of leaving. The cloak, the bread, the blessing. She asks her mother to place her hand on her head. She feels the warmth sink through hair, into scalp, into skull, into the tender places where certainty still bruises easily. Her father's eyes are wet in the way men's eyes get when they are trying not to be. He does not bless this mission. He blesses his daughter. It is enough. Before she goes, she returns to the church, where she first learned how the light looks when it is listening. She kneels in the cold nave. The stone greets her knees with its old certainty. She does not ask for signs. She asks for a heart that will remain soft even when encased in iron. She asks for the ability to tell the truth when telling it will cost her. She asks for sleep on the road and small, clean water for her thirst. The answers arrive without words. A steadier breath, a loosening around the eyes, the sense, never flashy, always practical, that she will be given what she needs at the hour she needs it, and not before. Outside, the horse is small and sturdy, a creature built for miles more than for show. She lays her palm against its neck. Its warmth is a good omen, though she is careful not to name omens as if they were coin to spend. She mounts. The winter air tastes of iron and pine. Vaucouleurs lowers behind her like a lid. The road draws a thin line away from everything known. Fear rides with her, a careful sentinel. Faith rides with her, a quiet friend. Resolve keeps the pace. Fatigue follows at a distance, patient as always. And Jean, still a village daughter, still someone's child, leans into the unknown, not because she enjoys danger, not because she thinks herself a heroine, but because the voices that found her in the garden sound so profoundly like truth that to ignore them would be to live at a slant. The world is wide. The way is narrow. She takes it. France, when Jeanne enters her story, is a quilt pulled thin. In the north and west, English banners hang from town gates. In Burgundian cities, the shutters close at dusk against strangers. Along the roads, fields curl in on themselves, unworked or trampled by hooves. The kingdom has a king who is not yet crowned, a court that has retreated to safer rooms, and a people who have learned too many kinds of silence. Famine is not dramatic here. It is patient. It tucks itself into bread that is more husk than wheat, into soup that has more water than bone. Men speak of taxes and levies in the same tone they use for weather, inescapable, impersonal. The war is old. It has taught everyone how to live with their jaw clenched. Villages go dark early. When carts creak by, no one lifts the shutter to watch. Mothers pull children in close when riders appear on the ridge. No one knows if the men belong to the English, the Burgundians, or to no banner at all. Priests bless graves quickly because there are many. The map is a set of little wounds. Paris lost, Rouen under foreign rule, the Loire, a braided boundary where hope hangs on bridges and fords. Orléans stands like a stubborn island in a wide river of trouble, ringed by English fortifications like stones in a necklace pulled tight. People talk about it as one speaks of a fever in the house, in low voices, with a calculation of days, with a soft refusal to imagine the worst. Around this ache, daily life persists with the plain courage of habit. In market squares, the scales still balance, the chickens still fuss, the cobblers still bend to their work. At night, the bells still call to prayer, though the sound can feel thinner, as if the air itself were tired. In such a world, the idea of a girl changing the direction of a war sounds like a story told to comfort children. Even those who long for miracles know better than to expect them. Into this ordinary severity, Jean rides. small in the saddle, wrapped against the weather, certain without swagger. Her certainty is not loud. It has the quiet of something well-founded, a bridge built stone by stone. When she reaches Chinon and stands in rooms where power has learned to entertain itself while waiting for rescue, she looks out of place in a way that draws glances and, eventually, attention. Courtiers are trained in the art of watching. Soldiers are trained in the art of measuring. Jean is watched and measured. The court tests her because courts test everything that makes them uncomfortable. They hide the Dauphin among his men to see if she will know him, as if truth could be fooled by a trick of costumes. The tale says she recognizes him at once. Whether the scene unfolded with theatrical neatness or with the hesitations of real life, something genuine passes between the two. His doubt, as heavy as a cloak soaked by rain. Her calm, as steady as a hand on a skittish horse. Around them, the air of the room changes, slightly, but enough that those closest feel it in their chests. Then come the examinations. Days of questions at Poitiers, men of letters weighing her words for heresy and harm. They ask about her visions, about obedience and pride, about the line between private revelation and public action. Jean answers without embroidery. She does not try to impress with theology she does not possess. She speaks the way she prays, directly, with the emphasis on truth rather than flourish. The scholars do not agree on everything, but they agree on enough. If God intends to use instruments that look unlikely in worldly eyes, that is God's habit. Send her, they advise, and let events testify. Permission is not the same thing as welcome. Among soldiers, the first reaction is a tilt of the mouth, a shake of the head. A girl? In armor? They know the weight of iron and the smell of fear. They know the stubborn arithmetic of sieges. They have trained themselves not to be moved by voices they cannot verify. In camps where rough humor is a shield against despair, Jean becomes the subject of jokes that sting and then lose their flavor. She does not answer mockery with anger. She answers it with rules. No swearing, she asks. Confession before battle. Communion when it can be had. No looting. No cruelty when conquest makes men careless. She asks the camp followers to leave, and she asks the men to help them go without shame or hunger. She asks them to remember that they will have to live inside their souls after the war is done. These requests are strange enough to be dismissed, and yet, given time, they begin to change the air. The camp grows cleaner. Nights are quieter. Soldiers who have forgotten how to hope notice their own hands, steadier, less eager for petty violence. They call it superstition when they are speaking to each other. In private, some call it relief. She wears men's clothes, practical for the road, practical for the press of battle. It violates custom and gives future judges something to wield against her. In the moment, it is the most sensible way to move safely through a world built for men. The short hair, the hose, the doublet, these are tools, not declarations. Still, every stitch challenges a boundary. Women in this century are meant to be veiled by domesticity, visible in their usefulness, invisible in their authority. Their wisdom is allowed if it soothes, suspect if it directs. Jean does not ask for an exception as a favor. She acts as if her exception is an obedience, and that frame unsettles even those inclined to kindness. The surprise is not her courage. The surprise is how ordinary she remains while exercising it, clear-eyed, courteous, mindful of the kitchen as well as the chapel, unbewildered by the needs of men who have not expected to take orders from a maiden. As she travels toward Orléans, the land tells her story in the language of need. Villages lean toward the road to watch, cautious and curious. Children grin when she lifts her hand in blessing. Women cross themselves with a speed that blends hope and fear. Old men meet her gaze with that measuring look that has made them useful their whole lives. Rumor walks faster than horses. By the time her small procession crests the ridges above the city, people are waiting. Eyes lifted, prayers half formed on their lips, as if watching the weather for a change in wind. Orléans, besieged, wears its suffering like a simple cloak. The English have made a collar of forts around it, bastions with names that sound like teeth. River traffic is cut, food is dear, and spirits are a resource stretched thin. The defenders have learned to ration hope like oats for a horse, just enough to keep moving. When Jean arrives, the bastard of Orléans, Jean de Dunois, practical, brave, and not easily swayed by fervor, looks at her with a soldier's realism. He respects courage. He distrusts theater. She meets him in the weather that command requires, calm inside pressure. The first test is the river. She is brought to the wrong bank by error or by intention. It hardly matters. The wind blows stubbornly against any passage to the city. Men mutter about bad luck. The ferrymen shrug. Jean stands still, banner planted like a white reed beside her, and says simply that the wind will change. This is not a spell. It is a posture. She speaks as if God's timing were something a person could lean against, the way one leans against a door one knows will open. And then the wind shifts, subtle at first, then decisively, the banners turning like faces toward a familiar voice. Boats cross, supplies enter. The city breathes a little deeper. Those who want to scoff find their mouths dry. Those who want to believe remember how. Her presence does not make war gentle, but it makes it cleaner. She rides in armor that glints as if it had its own light, but she carries a banner instead of a sword. The white field bears holy names, and the picture on it is less about art than about allegiance. Men watch it and feel the odd sensation that someone is watching them back. Not the enemy, not even God in heaven, but the better version of themselves that happens when they stand near a person who expects goodness as a matter of course. Jean's expectations are not rigid, they are precise. She does not ask men to be angels. She asks them to remember that they are men, which is to say, capable of restraint, able to distinguish courage from cruelty. Assaults begin, not the roaring chaos of legend, but the stepwise labor that sieges require. Earthworks, ladders, signals, hours of waiting, and then a sudden hour full of everything. Jean prays with the men before they move, simple words said simply. She does not lecture. She does not promise safety. She asks for grace to meet whatever comes with clean hearts. When she is wounded, an arrow lodged between neck and shoulder, she staggers, weeps, withdraws just long enough to feel the pain fully, and returns. She carries her hurt without dramatics, the way she has carried water and bread. Men see this, and something in their chests uncurls. Victories here are local and cumulative. The Bastide at Saint-Loup falls. Another bastion is taken. The great fort of the Tourelle, brooding over the bridge like a clenched fist, is assaulted, and after stubborn hours, opens. Each success tightens a new knot in the rope that pulls the city free. On the morning after, the English lift the siege. Orléans wakes into a day without the usual fear. The bells do not just ring, they pour. In streets, and chapels, people look at one another with that shy, startled joy that comes when grief has been the language so long that the tongue forgets how to shape anything else. Inside the army, the temperature changes. Those who scoffed now speak of Jean with the respectful shorthand soldiers use when they mean someone is dependable. She stands. She does not break. She remembers to pray. Some still mutter about chance and timing. Some still distrust what they cannot master. But disbelief has lost its swagger. In its place, a guarded admiration grows, practical, unromantic, enough to carry men into the next march with a step that is less heavy. The captains, Dunois, La Hire, Alençon, learn to fold her certainty into their calculations. She learns to respect their experience without surrendering her inner orders. Each adjusts slightly toward the other, and in that adjustment, the machine of war runs more smoothly. Courtiers are slower to warm. Their economy is attention. Their weapon is influence. They watch the city's deliverance and then return to their murmurs, measuring what Jean's rising star might eclipse. Some are genuinely devout and genuinely moved. Others are sincerely afraid that charisma, even in service of the kingdom, can unbalance delicate arrangements. Jean does not spend energy on their algebra. She behaves at court as she did in camp, modest, blunt, unmoved by flattery, uninterested in the glitter that money makes on surfaces. She asks for what she needs, armor that fits, a standard-bearer she trusts, time with a priest, and leaves politics to those who believe politics can save souls. And always, beneath the victories, the social fabric shows its weave. Women watch her and feel the quiet earthquake of possibility. No law has changed. No sermon has been rewritten. Yet something shifts in the common imagination. A path appears where there had been only hedge. Jean does not preach the overthrow of order. She walks within an order and reveals its hidden rooms. Yes, she wears men's clothes. Yes, she holds a command haloed by sanctity rather than rank. Yes, she speaks to princes as one servant to another rather than as subject to sovereign. But notice how she curtsies. Notice how she prays. Notice how she turns aside praise like a stream turned by a small stone. Her defiance is oddly obedient. Her obedience strangely bold. The priests who travel with the army see in her a kind of living homily. She insists on confession, not to decorate consciences, but to unburden them. She asks the men to fast, to keep vigil, to clean their speech, not because she imagines God counting sins like coin, but because she knows how a scrubbed floor brightens a room. When she stands near the line before an assault, she lifts her banner high so that men who cannot see heaven can at least see a sign pointing toward it. They say later, in tents lit by a single candle, that the sight steadied their breathing. News of Orléans runs ahead of her, along the Loire, like light ahead of dawn. Towns open their gates faster. Delegations meet her with eyes that want to believe before their mouths will admit it. She rides through streets where window sets bloom with faces. Children wave. An old woman puts her hand on Jean's boot and murmurs a blessing that sounds like a lullaby. The army grows, not only in number, but in spirit. Where men once expected to survive, some begin to expect to advance. The difference is not a trumpet blast. It is the subtle lift that keeps a body from stooping under its pack. All the while, the older order, customs, laws, expectations, watches, and recalibrates. The trial to come is already rooting itself in the ground, though no one can see its full shape. Her clothes will be an accusation. Her visions will be an indictment. Her success will be called immodesty. Her solitude, pride. But for now, the social weather is a kind wind, and the field of action is open. Jean takes that field with the same calm she took the road to Vaucouleurs. Step by step, prayer by prayer, rule by rule, her banner bright in a sky that is beginning, very slowly, to clear. Breathe with the rhythm of that sky, in on the bell, out on the river. See the streets of Orléans broomed clean at last, the stalls set up again, the ovens busy, the small matters of living returning as if they had only been out for a walk. Hear the soldiers sharpening blades without hurry, mending tack with unbitten lips, telling stories that are less cutting and more kind. Feel the court, cool and intricate, pulled, despite itself, toward a coronation road. And in the center of this movement, see Jean, still a village daughter at heart, holding to the simple center that has held her, grateful, steady, ready to go where the next quiet instruction points. History changes first in the chest, and only later on the map. Jean's arrival at Orléans altered the feeling tone of a kingdom long before it rewrote frontiers. Men who had learned to walk, bent under a sky of defeats, stood a little straighter. The rumor of deliverance became a habit of mind. In that quiet interior shift lay the seed of everything that followed: the lifted siege, the Loire campaign, and the road that turned north toward a cathedral where oil waited for a brow that had not yet known a crown. After Orléans, the army moved as if the ground itself had grown more level. Fort by fort, along the Loire, Jargeau, Meung, Beaugency, the English line loosened. At Patay, French cavalry struck with a speed that unsettled archers who had expected the old script to hold. Each success was modest on its own. Together, they braided into a cord strong enough to pull a prince toward his promised place. Jean called the Dauphin to Reims, not out of vanity, but from a clarity about symbols. In a fractured kingdom, legitimacy is a medicine. The anointing at Reims, holy oil on human skin, did not feed villages or repair bridges by itself, but it knit a story back together. Charles became not merely a claimant, but a king recognized by right and right's memory. The bells that day did more than ring. They proclaimed a center around which scattered loyalties could gather. The war did not end with that coronation. It changed tempo. The English grip remained firm in regions where their banners had learned the prevailing winds. Burgundy still kept its own counsel. Paris, weary and wounded, refused embrace. Yet the French crown, once tentative, began to behave as if the future could be built rather than merely endured. In the years that followed, reforms would professionalize the army and steady the realm. You can say those policies were born of political calculation. You can also say, and perhaps truer, that they grew in soil loosened by hope. Jean's work, then, was twofold: visible in the taking of bastions and invisible in the mending of nerve. Her path, which had run so straight through fields of doubt, turned suddenly into briar. The same clarity that had pulled a king to Reims drew her toward Paris with a boldness that not everyone shared. Autumn's chill found the army divided in purpose. The assault failed. Wounds, on bodies, on confidence, taught their practical lessons. Campaign seasons closed as winter does, shutting doors softly and firmly. Jean moved where she was needed, quick as a pilgrim answer to a bell. To towns along the Oise, to ramparts where the air smelled of river and fear. The trap, when it arrived near Compiègne, wore the ordinary clothes of war: a sally, a push, a gate shut too soon. Burgundian soldiers took her amid the confusion, hands rough with the fact that this prisoner was worth more than silver. She was transferred from lord to lord like a precious, volatile thing. At length the English purchased what they believed to be a solution. Here, systems showed their talent for finding the person who makes them most uneasy and arranging legal furniture around that person until breath becomes difficult. She was not kept in a church prison under women's watch, as custom would have required for an ecclesiastical case. She was guarded by soldiers in a castle whose stones had heard many kinds of fear. Practicalities, the need to protect herself among men, became future charges. Necessity was turned into fault. The trial at Rouen opened with the calm efficiency of a tide. Bishop Pierre Cauchon, learned, formidable, and politically aligned with those who needed Jean's witness, discredited, presided. The University of Paris lent pens and opinions. Scribal ink tracked careful Latin, while the woman at the center answered in the everyday speech of her province. They questioned her visions, their origin, their sound, their authority. They asked whether obedience to voices could excuse disobedience to men. They circled the matter of dress, a small thing magnified by familiarity, a boundary that could be pointed to and prosecuted. Questions were barbed and sometimes beautiful. One asked if she knew herself in God's grace, a trap set to catch either presumption or despair. Her reply, neither, moved like clean water over the barbs. If she was not, may God put her there. If she was, may God keep her there. Across 6 centuries, that answer still sounds like someone slipping free without struggle. Trials can be read like mirrors. They show less about the accused than about the age that convened them. Rouen's court revealed a century anxious about private experiences that produce public consequences. It revealed a church wary of sanctity that escapes its leashes. It revealed a politics that preferred pliable miracles, the kind that bless crowns without questioning how they are worn. Jean stood at the confluence of these currents. To those who needed the old treaty lines to hold, she was dangerous because she replaced fatalism with possibility. To those who loved order, she was dangerous because she had become a kind of order herself, answerable to a commander whose instructions did not pass through chancelleries. There is a gentler way to tell this. Systems do not hate people. They hate exceptions. An exception requires reinterpretation, and reinterpretation is hard work that can threaten the salaries of those who write definitions. Jean's crime, in the cool view of administrators, was not her ardor, but her efficacy. If she'd been merely pious, they would have smiled and let her be. If she had been merely successful, they would have found a shelf for her among the trophies. But she was both, and the combination suggested that the world might be governed, at least sometimes, by invisible arithmetic. That frightened sensible men. Under pressure, she signed a paper she could not read, recanting what could not be recanted without ceasing to be herself. For a few days she wore women's clothing. Then, in a cell where guards watched and taunted, she put back on men's clothes, perhaps because they had taken away the other garments, perhaps because she understood that those layers were not fashion, but armor. The court called it relapse. The law has always had names for inconveniences. Condemnation followed, wrapped in solemn words that hoped to transform necessity into justice. On a late May morning, they led her into a square where the wood was already stacked. The details, how the air smelled, how the crowd shifted its weight, belonged to the realm of sorrow, where we tread softly. What matters For the perspective we are building is not the heat of that hour, but its echo. Her death did not cauterize the wound she represented. It widened it. Those who needed her undone had to live with the awkward fact that her quiet courage at the end matched her courage in the field. Those who had fought under her had to carry forward without the voice that had steadied them. And the king, whose crown she had helped secure, had to choose a policy toward her memory: gratitude, neutrality, or silence. He chose, mostly, distance. Politics often thanks its instruments by misplacing them. But history's furniture can be rearranged. A generation later, when the temperature of the realm had altered and the war's long arc had bent toward France, the case was reopened. Witnesses spoke. The soldiers who had ridden at her side, the villagers who had known her as a child, clerics who had seen the trial's corners cut. The findings voided Rouan's verdict and returned Jeanne to the register of the faithful. Centuries after that, the church placed her among its saints, not to deny the complexity of her story, but to honor the integrity with which she lived it. As for France, she became a mirror in which very different faces recognized themselves. Monarchists admired her loyalty. Republicans cherished her peasant stubbornness. Believers found a model of discernment. Secular people found a figure of civic courage. Even those who mistrusted sanctity found in her a human scale, work, resolve, tenderness, that made reverence feel less like flattery and more like recognition. So was she a saint or a heretic, a warrior or a political instrument? The perspective that helps us rest is this: she was a person. Persons exceed our categories. She believed God spoke to her, and she arranged her life around that belief with a steadiness uncommon in any century. If you cannot believe the source, you can still admire the fruit: honesty, compassion, coherence between word and deed. If you suspect that princes used her, you are likely right. And yet she too used princes, gently, firmly, to reach the field where her obedience pointed. Agency and instrumentality are not enemies. In the complex weather of history, they are often the same wind felt from different sides of the leaf. As for the war, her contribution can be traced not only in place names and dates, but in the shape of what became possible. After Jeanne, French confidence and royal policy found each other. Reforms that professionalized soldiers, steadied finances, and disciplined the violence of war could take root in ground no longer salted with despair. Her banner does not appear in the ordinances. Her name is not in the budgets. And yet you can feel her in the tone. No longer apologetic, no longer resigned, with which a kingdom addressed its future. And what of us, lying here with the slow metronome of breath, listening across 600 years? Jeanne's story thins the distance between then and now. We too live amid systems designed to smooth human edges. We too know the sound of official caution, muffling inconvenient courage. We too are tempted daily to make our peace with a narrow definition of what one life can mean. The lesson that coils gently from her century into ours is not that visions solve policy, nor that certainty sanctifies any cause the self prefers. It is simpler: a person who aligns action with conscience, patiently, without vanity, step by step, can alter the atmosphere in which events occur. Others breathe that air and find themselves capable of more. Notice how quietly that works. Jeanne did not outshout her doubters. She outweighted them. She did not overwhelm her comrades with charisma. She asked them to clean their speech, to confess, to treat the defenseless with mercy. In short, to live so that victory would not ruin them. She did not make a king. She reminded a man on the cusp of authority that authority is a service. She did not abolish war. She moved within it like a clear bell, so that even those who could not believe as she did could still march straighter for having heard. If the system is an ocean, then a single will looks small, like a skiff in swells. Yet the skiff can choose its heading. And sometimes, by setting a line and keeping it, that small craft draws others into its wake. A flotilla forms. Currents adjust. Coasts once thought fixed are measured again. The ocean is no less vast, but it is now, in part, persuaded. Let the mind rest on that image. A white banner in wind. A village daughter's voice, unadorned, refusing falsity. A courtroom where questions shine like knives, and a simple answer moves past them without being cut. A square where sorrow does its worst, and yet cannot write the last sentence. Then a long, long aftermath in which the meaning of those scenes ripens, season after season, into a harvest that feeds far beyond the field that bore it. Breathe in, and let what is complicated become gentle. Breathe out, and let the opposites soften. Saint and heretic, soldier and pawn, miracle and method. Let them sit beside one another without quarrel, like old adversaries who have grown tired, at last, of being certain. What remains is the human shape at the center, sturdy and small, doing the next right thing as clearly as she can hear it. That is the perspective that steadies. Not a verdict, but a view. And now, with that wider view held lightly, we will return to the narrower road, stones under hoof, voices at the gate, the breathless press of men on ladders, where escalation waits and choices harden into consequence. The night is kind. It will go with us. The bells are far off, but you can still feel their pattern in your ribs. In on courage, out on calm. The room at Rouen is bright with winter light that finds its way through narrow glass and settles on ink and vellum. Chairs scrape, pens whisper, robes hush along the floor. Jean stands where defendants stand, without ornament, with the steady stillness of someone who has learned to breathe inside other people's weather. Questions come like waves, regular and wearing. She answers as she always has, plainly, without embroidery, keeping her voice in the middle register where truth lasts. They ask how the voices sound, like bells, like a human mouth, like thoughts that do not belong to her. She says they are beautiful and humble, and that they speak the language of home. They ask what saints looked like, clothes, hair, crowns, as if salvation could be sketched by a court artist. She says she recognized them by light and peace. They ask if she would submit what she has heard to the church's judgment. She says she already does. And by church she means the one that belongs to God, not merely men who hold offices. The distinction troubles them. The scribes keep writing. They ask about dress. It seems so small against Orléans and Rheims, against banners and bridges, and yet the questions return to it, the way a tongue returns to a sore tooth. Why the men's clothing? She answers with the patient economy of a villager. Safety among soldiers, practicality on the road, the cords and fastenings that make it harder for a guard to harm her in the night. The bishops make notes. The law is comfortable with garments. Garments can be named, counted, condemned. They ask about the sign she promised to the Dauphin, whether she gave him some secret token, some miracle that could be displayed on a table like a jewel. She refuses spectacle. She speaks of inner certainty given to a fearful prince. They circle, they press, they prick with clever barbs. One question designed to catch presumption, if answered yes, and despair if answered no. Do you know yourself to be in God's grace? For a moment, the room leans toward her, held by the trap's geometry. She slips through it without struggle. If I am not, may God put me there. If I am, may God keep me there. The wave breaks and withdraws. The scribes note the words carefully, because carefulness is the dignity of those whose task is to record. Days braid into weeks. The schedule is the pressure. Morning hearings, afternoon private interrogations, the long corridor of hours with the sound of keys and boots. Men speak sharply when she speaks steadily. They speak gently when they set snares. Sometimes they mock. Sometimes they feign fatherly concern. Sometimes they simply let silence expand until the mind wants to fill it with anything at all. Jean learns to let silence pass like a cloud. She keeps her answers in the shade of what she knows, not in the glitter of what they hope she will claim. There is the matter of submission, repeated with variations, like a theme in a piece of music that returns dressed differently. Will you bend? Will you call your private voice error if we say it is? Will you hand over your conscience and let us curate it? Each time, she places her obedience where she has always placed it and tries gently to keep that placement from sounding like rebellion. She is not a firebrand. She is a bell, clear, insistent, made for one purpose. Fatigue arrives as a quiet animal and takes its place at her side. It is not dramatic. It lowers the lids, dries the mouth, makes thoughts heavy as wet wool. She carries it the way she carried wounds, openly, without complaint. Guards see this and feel the embarrassed tug of reluctant respect. Some lessen their taunts, others do not. The room keeps its brightness. The questions keep their rhythm. Then the paper. A recantation written in a hand, not hers. Words arranged into the shape of surrender. The conditions are made to sound merciful. Dress again as a woman. Keep to a cell. Admit mistake. A moment's compliance, and the flames withdraw. The voices have taught her to love life without clinging to it. They have also taught her to be careful. She looks at the page and sees not salvation, but an exchange she cannot make without ceasing to be the person who was sent. Still, the room presses in, breath warm, pen ready. Fear's argument is practical, persuasive. Live now, sort the rest later. Under the crush of hours, confused, perhaps deprived of the clothes that kept her safe among men, she yields her name to ink. The court breathes out. For 3 days, the world seems to narrow to a quiet corridor. But time is a slow arbiter. In the cell, guards enter, jeer, threaten. A bundle of women's clothes is promised or denied. Accounts differ, but the outcome does not. She takes up the men's garb again, perhaps because she must, perhaps because she understands in her bones what the court will call relapse, that her layered obedience includes this too. The small cords at her waist become, to her judges, a rope she has tied around her own neck. The accusation is renewed with relief, as though order had found its way back to its favorite path. The verdict gathers itself with clerical grace. Words, solemn, polished, are placed like stones along a riverbank to direct the current where authority wants it to run. The crimes are named. The punishment is named. The square is prepared. The court's faces are careful and composed, as faces are when they believe they have served both God and law. Jean listens. The world becomes very simple. Morning, breath, prayer, wood. Dawn over Rouen is cool and thin, a veil of gray that softens edges. In the castle, The air smells of damp stone and iron. Jean wakes to the small sounds of a building rousing. A bucket set down, a hinge cleared of sleep, a sparrow testing its voice in the courtyard. She asks for the sacrament and receives it with a hunger that is not fear, but longing. Bread on the tongue. A prayer that sits so deep, it is more like a pulse than a sentence. She forgives as she has been taught to forgive. No flourish, no theatrics. Because to die clean is a gift she can give herself. They dress her simply. The cords at her waist are practical again. Not a legal problem, but something to keep cloth where it belongs. She steps into the morning. The city is awake, drawn by the gravity of verdicts. People watch with the same faces with which they have watched battles. Some eager, some sorrowing, most simply human, wanting to see the thing that has been spoken about so loudly it has become a weather. She walks as she has always walked, as if the path were narrow and worth keeping. In the square, the scaffold rises with carpenterly clarity. Wood does what it always does, holds, creaks, waits. A placard names her crimes. She does not read it. She looks instead at a crucifix held up by a compassionate hand, and then at another, hastily fashioned. 2 sticks, a strip of cloth, so that the symbol can be close when the body cannot move. She asks that it be raised high, that her eyes can rest on it. She whispers the name that has steadied her for years. Jesus, not cried to pierce the sky, not hurled as a challenge, but spoken like a key that fits a lock she has been turning, patiently, all this time. The fire is set by men who have done this before. There is no need to linger in its mechanics. The wood takes, the air shifts. Heat does what heat does. She prays aloud so others may have something gentle to hold in their ears later. Between phrases, the world narrows to breath. Small sips that become a rhythm. In and the name. Out and the letting go. Witnesses close enough to hear will tell of peace on her face. Others will tell of smoke and crowd and the way sorrow can feel like a bell struck too hard. Both accounts meet in the same place. A life ending without bitterness. The last word like the first word of a prayer. And then a task beyond her is finished. The square empties slowly, as squares do after spectacles. People return to ovens and errands, to ledgers and looms. But something not visible has altered its address. The men who cut wood for the scaffold go home and find their hands steadying around their children's shoulders. A scribe sets down his pen and notices that the ink has left a small, bright lake on the desk. A guard remembers how small her feet looked on the boards, and without deciding to, chooses gentleness in a lesser moment the next day. History is written in loud script and small marginalia. Both carry weight. Her death is meant to unmake her. Instead, it unbinds her from the narrow frame of the moment and lets meanings travel. The king she crowned grows older, policies are drafted, campaigns conclude, years gather and pass. The case is reopened, witnesses speak, the verdict is unwritten, centuries fold. A church that feared her learns to name her. Nations find in her a mirror. Power sees loyalty. Poverty sees dignity. Cynicism, when it is tired, sees integrity and rests a little. For us, listening in a room where the night lies kindly along the walls, the aftermath is simpler and closer. The question her life leaves at the bedside is not how to stage miracles, not how to win wars, not how to withstand courts, though all those things have their hour. It is how to keep a small flame honest, to hold a line of obedience through weather, to speak when it is time and be still when it is not, to let courage be the quiet companion of mercy, She did not defeat the system by shouting it down. She wore it out with steadiness. She allowed no one, not princes, not judges, not fear, to become the editor of her conscience. So the escalation has brought us here, to a morning that began cold, and to a name spoken warm, to wood that did its work, and to a life that did its work more quietly and more lastingly. The resolution is not triumphal. It is soft. Bells that ring for someone who is gone, and for the selves that remain to learn. In the city, the Seine keeps moving. In the fields far away, wheat leans into wind and rights itself. In your room, breath is the tide that returns without being asked. Let your shoulders ease. Let her banner, white with holy names, become a page the night writes on. Peace, patience, a courage that does not raise its voice. The story has reached its earthly end, and yet it is not finished. It has entered the place where stories become weather. Feel that weather settling in you now, gentle and clear. On the inhale, receive it. On the exhale, release what is no longer needed, fear, and the arguing mind, and the old narratives that say a single life cannot bend anything. We will carry her forward, not as a furnace, but as a lamp. The next part of our journey will be quieter, a meadow of thoughts, where meanings sort themselves and lie down. For now, rest in the stillness after the bell. The square is empty. The morning is bright. Jesus, she said, and the word opened like a door. You may step through it into calm. Let's rest with a simple question that opens like a quiet door. Why does Jean's story still move us so deeply? Not because of spectacle. Centuries are full of that. Not because of flawless victory. History rarely offers it. Her power is gentler and more lasting. She aligned her outer life with her inner knowing and kept that line straight through weather. That is all, and that is everything. We recognize this not as myth, but as a human shape we could, in moments, inhabit ourselves. Breathe in. Breathe out. Let the mind loosen its grip. When a single person holds to conscience without shouting, the room changes. Jeanne did not conquer despair with noise. She seeded order in small ways. Clean speech. Mercy in the moment when power could have been harsh. Prayer said simply, work done well. She showed that integrity is not a pose. It is a rhythm. Like bells, it returns at the right hours and keeps time for others who have forgotten how. Another breath in. The shoulders lower. The jaw softens. We remember her because she proved that courage can wear an ordinary face. No special schooling. No courtly polish. No magic aside from the steady attention she gave to the next right step. There is comfort in that. If history's levers move at all, they move under the pressure of modest hands repeating faithful motions. She did not erase fear. She befriended it and asked it to ride quietly behind faith. That is a skill for a lifetime, and it begins wherever we are. Now let's bring this close to your life, here, tonight, in the hush between the day and sleep. You also live among systems, efficient, intricate, sometimes impatient with human edges. You carry a phone that chimes like a tiny court, demanding audiences all day. You move through headlines that train the mind to flinch. You keep a calendar that tries to measure the unmeasurable tenderness of being alive. And still, inside all of that, you carry a small, honest center that knows when a thing is true. Jeanne reminds you to trust it, not recklessly, not as an excuse to bulldoze others, but as a way to walk straight. Breathe in slowly, counting to 4. Breathe out a little longer, counting to 6. Again, soft, unhurried. Consider the small places where your courage lives, the apology you could make without defending yourself, the quiet boundary you could hold without anger, the kindness you could offer with no audience, the work you could finish thoroughly even when no one checks. These are not dramatic gestures. They are stitches. Enough stitches and a frayed fabric holds. Jean's rules for soldiers translate cleanly into a civilian night. Clean your speech. It lowers the temperature of your own heart. Confess in whatever form your life allows. A frank journal line, a call to someone you hurt, a prayer that says only help. Receive communion in a wide sense. Take in what is nourishing. Good words, honest food, a walk that returns you to your body. Refuse cruelty, especially the kind that travels fastest through screens. Notice how these practices are not grand. They are grounding. They turn agitation into attention. Now, let the images we've shared return as friendly companions. A dawn unfolding over fields near the muse. The color, not hurried. The light arriving like a promise, nobody forced. See how the world brightens from the edges inward. You do not beg the light. You make room for it. Your breath can do the same, widening the borders of the chest, letting clarity seep in from the margins. Bells in a tower, unseen, exact, sounding at measured intervals. They do not command, they invite. Let each inhale be a bell, a round, simple note. Let each exhale be the space that follows, generous, uncluttered. Where there has been buzzing and static, the bell draws a smooth line through the noise. Firelight on a hearth, the soft conversation of embers, the way warmth occupies a room without insisting on itself. Firelight does not reach every corner. It doesn't need to. It offers a center, and the rest of the darkness arranges itself politely around it. Think of your attention that way. It doesn't have to illuminate everything. Choose one small center, your breath, a phrase you love, an image of a field after rain, and let the mind sit by it the way hands rest toward the fire after a cold walk. In this softer place, return to the question, why does she still matter? Because she shows that meaning grows where willingness meets practice. Willingness without practice is heat without light. Practice without willingness is duty without heart. She held both, and so her days, muddy, smoky, ordinary, glowed. In our time, faith takes many shapes. For some, it speaks the language of church. For others, it speaks in service, in art, in the brave refusal to lie. Whatever name you give your anchor, let it hold. Jean's obedience was not blind. It was attentive. She listened, tested, acted, and then listened again. This loop is as modern as any method: perception, discernment, response, review. Tonight, you can try it with something simple. Perceive the breath. Discern if it is shallow or deep. Respond by lengthening the exhale. Review the feeling that follows. Let the nervous system learn that safety can be practiced. Now the room grows gentler. The present loosens its tight weave. If you feel a fear tugging at your sleeve, the kind that visits after midnight, try speaking to it as Jean spoke to doubt, without hatred, without bargains. You may ride with me, you can say, but you may not steer. Then turn your attention to something ordered and good, a memory of work done honestly, a face that calms you, a phrase that fits like a small stone in the palm. Be not afraid, one day at a time, I am with you. Let your inner speech be clean. It will tidy the room from the inside. The dawn returns, a little nearer now, a pale wash behind the shutters of your thoughts. Somewhere far off, bells answer one another across a river. On a hearth older than our names, firelight lowers itself, ember by ember, to a tender red. You are not required to carry the whole century to bed. Lay it down. The fields manage the wind without your help. The river keeps its counsel. The stars have worked the night shift for a very long time. If your mind reaches for the end of Jean's road, let it find not flames, but fruit. Confidence stitched back into a people. Policy that stands a little straighter because hearts do. A crown that remembered, for a moment, its duty to serve. A village girl's name used carefully by those who disagree about much else, but agree about this. Integrity clarifies. Let that word float in the room like a lantern. Breathe in for 4, hold for 2, breathe out for 6. Again, softer. And if you picture her banner, let it become simple. A white cloth that catches the light of morning. Imagine it hanging in your own room, not as a relic, but as a reminder. Choose a clean word, a kind act, a faithful task. You do not need armor tonight. You need only the willingness to rest, so that tomorrow's willingness can wake. Now the meadow of thoughts thins. Footsteps fade on the wooden floorboards of memory. The candle's halo grows smaller and more golden. You are safe to be smaller too. History is large enough to continue without you for a few hours. Let it. A last time, name the images that soothe. Dawn, lifting the horizon. Bells crossing the air in measured notes. Firelight settling into a quiet bed of red. With each exhale, imagine the room becoming gentler, the mattress kinder, the future less insistent. If a worry returns, place it by the door like a pair of shoes. You can pick it up in the morning if it still fits. Why does Jean endure? Because she shows us that the path through fear is made of small, steady steps taken in the direction of truth, and that such steps, repeated, become a road others can trust. That is not an argument. It is a comfort. And now, let the words thin to a thread. Let the images remain. A pale dawn, just beginning at the edge of thought. Distant bells, soft as breath. Counting time you do not need to count. A fire's warm hush, painting the walls with slow gold. The story dims like a candle, and memory glows with a gentle light in the dark of centuries. Let everything become simple now. Straw, bells, dawn. Feel the straw beneath you, springy, honest, faintly sweet, remembering sun and meadow. It meets the shape of your body and says, rest here. Listen for bells far away, measured, gentle, like circles drawn in the air that widen and fade. See the first color of dawn at the edge of thought, pale, patient, unhurried. Inhale, exhale, even slower. Inhale through the nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale through the mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, softly, like laying a blanket over the day. Straw under shoulder, straw beneath the spine, straw cradling the weight you no longer need to carry. Bells marking time you do not have to keep. Dawn lifting the sky inside your chest. Inhale, exhale, even slower. Release the brow, unclench the jaw, let the tongue rest. Feel the hands forget their tasks. Feel the feet grow warm and far away. Straw, bells, dawn. The words themselves are small boats. Climb into one and drift. If a thought knocks, let it sit by the door like a pair of shoes. If a worry speaks, thank it and let it pass down the lane. The room is kind. The night is keeping watch. Inhale, exhale, even slower. On the inhale, gather what is good. Warmth, safety, quiet. On the exhale, set down what is heavy. Effort, noise, the day's sharp edges. Let the breath be a bell, a round note in, a wide silence out. Hear straw whisper as it settles. Hear bells answer one another across a river you cannot see. See dawn, pale to silver at the horizon of sleep. Your forehead cools like stone at morning. Your chest rises and falls in a tide that needs no captain. Your thoughts move like clouds that forget to rain. Inhale, exhale, even slower. Count if you like. 4 in, 6 out, then 4 in, 7 out. Or let the counting go and follow only the feeling of softening. Straw, bells, dawn. A simple trinity for resting. The banner is folded. The fire has quieted to embers. Somewhere, a door is gently latched. Somewhere, a river keeps its counsel. Here, the bed holds you with uncomplicated grace. Inhale, exhale, even slower. Your breath becomes the bell. Your heartbeat becomes the footstep of dawn. Nothing is required. Nothing is missing. Sleep approaches on quiet feet, the way morning approaches fields. Straw, bells, dawn. Sleep peacefully. May your sleep be light as the wind over the fields of Lorraine.